Hey up and welcome to the Strategy Sessions. My name's Andy Jarvis and I'm here to welcome you today to episode 13. We've got an interview coming with Katie Jackson fairly soon, who's the MD of TBWA in London. I recorded the interview with Katie before something quite seismic happened in the marketing industry, so I'm having to record this to top on the beginning of it, so we can talk about one of the worst things that I've seen in a long time. It's by Mondeleza. You may have seen it. I've ranted about it a little bit on social media. And while I don't want this podcast to become really negative and just me whinging about lots of stuff, sometimes you just have to say what you really think. Now, what am I thinking about? Have you heard the word humaning? Now, if you sat there listening going, humaning? That's not the real world. You're right, it's not. It's made up by the idiots at Mondeleza or their agency or whoever was involved in it. And this is their new brand purpose. There's a 2-minute video which you can see. I'll post a link to a blog in the show notes that I've written about it. But it kind of ruined my day when I found out about it, to be honest. It was just bloody awful. So, okay, what is it? So they have this statement which they put out, which is something like, we are excited to announce the evolution of our company's global marketing strategy, humaning. Humaning is a unique, consumer-centric approach to marketing that creates real human connections with purpose, moving Mondeleza International beyond cautious, data-driven tactics and uncovering what unites us all. We are no longer marketing to consumers, but creating connections with humans. Now, that isn't written for satire. That's written by a serious company's team about their new marketing. It's one of the reasons why many people in the serious jobs in companies in the boardroom think that marketers have disappeared up their own arse a long time ago, when people who actually supposedly know what they're talking about do this. I couldn't quite work it out. I mean, first of all, why invent a new word, humaning? Secondly, what was your marketing before if it wasn't about creating connections with people? What were you doing? What was your marketing strategy if it wasn't that? I'll tell you what it was. It was shit. That's what it was. I just don't understand why why you even need to do this. We're no longer marketing to consumers. We're creating connections with humans. Somebody said on one of the tweets they sent to me, said, I know, who buys more chocolate than consumers? Humans! Yes, humans! It's like something from the life of Brian. It is utterly, utterly awful. The number one job we have as marketers is to bring the voice of the consumer into the room, right? Cautious data-driven tactics. Use data whenever you can, right? But don't have to be cautious with it. That's your own fault if that's how you're using it. Uncovering what unites us all. No. People just want your product to solve a problem for them. They don't want you uniting around the world. I just don't get it. I really just don't get it. It was the sort of thing that sent a chill down my spine when I read it. And so I posted about it on LinkedIn and somebody said, well, it's job done for them, isn't it? Because what they've done is they've got people talking about it. As if that the only job of marketing is to create kind of top-level awareness, especially when it's got negative sentiment. You know, there's no such thing as bad press. No such thing as bad publicity. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, is this the sort of shite you want attached to your brand? Hopefully this will disappear somewhere up its own arse, which is obviously where it came from, and be gone and be sent back to wherever it came from. And Mondeleza get a little bit of sanity back and start creating marketing for consumers. Because let's be honest, they're the ones who spend the money and buy the product. So never mind connections with humans. Let's just look at selling stuff. That's the job of what you're doing when you're in FMCG, isn't it? Anyway, I'm going to stop ranting because we could make this a full hour of me talking about my disgust about that. I am going to try and get someone from Mondeleza on the podcast just so I can assassinate them, or at least get them to explain their work, because I'd love to see the workings behind this utter shite. I really would. I've blogged about this. There's a link in the comment. I've got a lot more to say about this, but I just don't want it to drip into negativity. I should also give a little shout out to my own services at this stage. If you are trying to use brand purpose to improve your marketing, there are many, many, many great examples of doing this, and there are lots and lots of good ways of doing it. Authenticity is really the key to what you're doing. I help companies do this as well. One of the key things that we do is I have a process called it set the dogs on it. It's great fun. It can be a little bit tense sometimes. You sit in a room and you set the dogs on stuff like this, and you look at what's all the potential options and how can this spin in different ways. Can we really stand up to what we're setting ourselves up for? And if you can get through that workshop, you know that it'll be good to come out the other side. So if you are looking at doing brand purpose and want to do it right, so you don't have to make up words like this or disappear with a load of 50-some words of corporate bullshit, give me a shout, get in touch. I'm more than happy to do that. I also have another product which is out at the minute called the Strategy Sprint. What that is 5 structured calls over a week, fully remote product, so it can work with anyone anywhere in the world, where we test parts of your marketing plan. So it's not about starting and writing everything from scratch. It's about testing what you've got and pulling it apart, structured in a systematic way, putting it back together and helping find areas of improvement. It could be about brand purpose. It could be about other problems that you've got. Again, that is something that is on the website. There's a link in the show notes. It's eximomarketingstrategy.com/sprint. Have a look at that page and see what is available there. Enough of the sales messages now. Let's get into the interview with Katie. Hey up, my name is Andy Jarvis and thank you for joining me again on the Strategy Sessions. We've hit episode 13 and I am super excited about my guest today. When you read somebody's bio and it finishes with this line, you know you're going to be in for a treat for the next 45 minutes. It says, a staunch feminist, Katie has previously been described as Mary Poppins on steroids. I'm joined by Katie Jackson, the MD of TBWA. Katie, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. What an introduction, hey?
Well, listen, Mary Poppins on steroids. You're going to have to explain that. Come on, that's amazing.
I know. It's a pretty catchy description, isn't it? I mean, to be honest, the truth behind it is that when I was in my previous agency, our chief creative officer and I worked together across a number of different businesses, and I think she kept on describing me as being stern but kind, full of humour, very good-hearted, but still able to be firm. And then one day she just turned around to me and said, oh my God, I know who you remind me of. You're like Mary Poppins, but on steroids. I still don't know whether it's a compliment, but we'll go with it for now.
I mean, look, everybody loves Mary Poppins, so, let's take that. And I imagine that you must be great on road trips as well if you've got a handbag where everything can just keep coming out of it.
Hey, I'm an account person by trade. We have to be prepared for anything.
Brilliant. So Mary Poppins on steroids is with us today from London. You're joining us. You are at home, as everybody else is. And I do love on the TBWA website, you are now /WFH, as everybody is at the moment. So give us a little bit of a feeling for TBWA. If people are listening and they're going, who are TBWA? What? Hey, who? Tell us about the agency.
TBWA, celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. So it's a big year for us. We are a creative agency, or indeed a creative collective across the world, really. We have offices in most countries around the world, and I am lucky enough to be the MD of the London office. A lot of the time you'll see us describe ourselves as the disruption company. And I know on previous episodes, there has been a lot of conversation around disruption itself and new buzzword, etc.
The disruption klaxon's going to go off. Hold on.
Oh, quick. There it is. Disruption klaxon. So we describe ourselves as a disruption company. We've been using the disruption methodology really for the last 25 of those 50 years. And we should come on to talk about that because it's something I really, really believe in, and it's something of unique value to TBWA in terms of the application of that methodology. But we, solve business problems for all of our clients in the most creative ways possible, and that certainly isn't limited to comms. So we cover a full raft of creative solutions across the board for all of our clients, and we have a cracking good time doing it. So it's a good place to be.
Excellent. And when lockdown isn't making everybody work from home, whereabouts is the office in London?
So we are in the lovely towers of Bankside over in Southwark. We are actually owned by Omnicom. Omnicom's our holding company, and most Omnicom agencies in the UK, or certainly in London anyway, should I say, are based in the Bankside towers in Southwark. So not too far from where I am in Brixton.
Brilliant stuff. Look, let's dive straight into disruption, because there's a few words in business, and especially in marketing, that are overused to the point of being pointless. And strategy is one of them. The Strategy Sessions podcast, here we are. And disruption is another one. And disruption has just become the buzzword where everyone throws. We're doing something slightly different. We're disrupting an industry. So what does disruption mean to you? You've been at this 25 years before anybody said disruption. So what's your take on it?
It's a really good question. And there's a wonderful document that does the rounds occasionally across TBWA, which charts the birth of the disruption methodology for TBWA. And it uses some really lovely language, which is, ultimately the world is in constant turbulence, and never has that been more true than 2020. The world is in constant turbulence, and within that, clients, businesses, brands need to identify how they can protect and nurture and grow a larger share of the future. And what that means is you need to understand what conventions of certain categories are at play in order to continue to find ways to break them iteratively. So the key to disruption is that it is a continuous and ongoing process, right? You can, of course, disrupt categories, you can disrupt markets, you can disrupt in many, many different ways. And that is exactly the point. What TBWA are really, really interested in doing and continue to do on an ongoing basis for all of its clients is convention hunt. And I love this phrase because it's so active. We go convention hunting every day, every hour, every minute.
That's a phrase you have to be very careful saying as well, isn't it?
Why is that?
Convention. It's just if you've got, anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyway, carry on.
Naughty. We do try, and we've got lots and lots of tools and processes within TBWA to allow us to mine for those conventions constantly. And that might be, for a period of weeks, there are a number of conventions that we identify in the social space or influencer space or in the news or in wherever it may be. So how for our brands can we look at framing those and disrupting them and doing the opposite, so that we can create that larger share of attention within culture for our clients, but also build a much larger share of the future, as I said. So it's a really wonderful methodology when you start to get under the skin of it. And I don't know whether you've seen our diagrammatic way of representing it. We have convention hunting, where we always try and identify the convention that we are looking at as a square. Then we identify the vision that should come off of that convention, so where we want to be heading, which is our circle. And then our famous triangle, disruption triangle, is the disruption that breaks the barriers for those clients as a result.
So it's not just about being different for the sake of being different, which I think is where some people, when they use disruption, they mean different. And actually what you're talking about is understanding the norms of an industry or category or sector, and then finding ways to subvert them, change them, alter them, so your clients stand out as being a little bit different in that market. That seems to be what you're saying, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's a good way of expressing it. And the key to that really is, you shouldn't be doing things differently for the sake of doing things differently, because you need to understand what the codes or conventions of a certain way of being are before you decide which ones you're going to break. And that the decision for breaking those conventions needs to be rooted in a very clear vision and strategy, rather than just for the sake of. Because any old person or business can go, hey, when you zig, we zag. In fact, a famous agency describes themselves as such.
I saw somebody from, it was Google, talking about, because Google were heavy into self-driving cars for a while. Haven't heard them talk about it for a bit, but in some of their early iterations, they had self-driving cars with no steering wheels and no pedals, full self-driving cars. And when they started to do testing with people, what do you think? It spooked them. So putting a steering wheel back in and pedals back in the car, even just as dummies, improved how people reported their thoughts and feelings of the car, because they were conventions that they didn't want disrupting. They felt that they needed that. So the car self-driving was enough of a disruption. You didn't have to change everything. And is there a little bit of that in what you do, is that you actually need to get disruption right? So if you go too far, you actually make it difficult for people understanding what you are or what you're trying to say. You need to sort of stay close to the convention, but just far enough away to be different, rather than trying to invent something entirely new, because people don't quite understand what that is unless you're spending big enough to make them understand.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, you think about tropes of certain categories when it comes to communications, and you'll tend to find that a lot of perfume communications will look the same. Hair care communications will look the same. FMCG campaigns a lot of the time will look the same.
Yes, yeah.
If you move too far away from those, people will not understand what you're trying to sell. Because what we can't mistake here is that our job is still to try and drive consumerism, ultimately, right? We still have products to sell and brands to build for our clients. So we absolutely have to adhere to some selected conventions in order to make sure that we are not losing any base equity within those categories or tropes that we need to hold on to. But our job is to find new and different and disruptive ways around those to drive greater relevance, to drive a greater share of attention and culture for our clients.
Now, you mentioned brand building there as well, which is something I want to get into, because I sort of started doing traditional marketing, moved into digital 10 years ago. See myself as a marketer who understands digital rather than a digital marketer. Slight difference, I think. Maybe it's semantics, who cares? But what I find with a lot of digital marketers is that they have been told, or they believe, that brand building is just nonsense. It's just a waste of money because there's no ROAS measure, there's no clicks to sales measurement and things like that. And I think partly that's because what passes as brand building is often bullshit. But what you're tell me, what are you talking about with brand building for your clients, and what do you look at as measurements, and the sort of the big picture brand building that you're looking at?
I wonder if there might be two questions in that. So, because I think the first part of it is, do we feel like those people or individuals who describe themselves as digital marketeers have forgotten or underestimated the importance of brand or creative storytelling within what they do? And I think the answer is, don't hate me for saying this, the answer is a little bit yes and a little bit no. And to be honest, it depends on that person's background. Yeah. If you have a digital marketer who's grown up and trained in a very specialist area, this is T-shape versus I-shape individuals here, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a specialist eye expert in a certain field within digital who hasn't necessarily ever experienced a broader grounding in marketing and its codes and patterns and tropes and conventions, then I think, yes, of course, they will underestimate the impact of creativity in what they're doing. However, if you have a T-shaped marketer who becomes trained and experienced in a specific part of the digital landscape, then that individual or that team will always understand the power and value of brand building and storytelling. Because I think the second part then of what you ask is about the value of brand. And the value of brand, I think, is really, really simple, which is you look at a balance sheet and you look at intangible assets. That's your brand. That's the power of your brand. It affords you the opportunity to go, yes, my product is made with 100% cotton and that person's product is made with 100% cotton, but you're going to pay 3 times more for mine because I have created a story and built a world around this product that is so compelling, you will overlook anything else. And that is really, really, really powerful. And building brands is all around building stories. And what's become fascinating, I think, almost tiptoeing back into what you were saying with conventions and being careful around how much you disrupt in those conventions, is if 2020, I won't say it because I know you've got a klaxon for it, but in 2020, if that's taught us anything, it's a retreat into the familiar and the comfortable. We've seen a massive retrenchment to brands that have very, very high legacy trust scores. People have gone, in times of scariness and uncertainty out there, I need things that I know. And actually, as marketers as well, we have to be mindful of that, because if we go too far and we break too many boundaries, people aren't comfortable with that right now.
Yeah, and I think you look at, that works across loads of sectors, and the BBC and I think the Guardian released some figures in the early lockdown where I think the top 10 day of page impressions, or the top 10 stories, had the C word, COVID, in them.
You said it, not me. You said it.
Go me Klaxon. we are going to talk about COVID a bit more in a minute, but you're right. People went to places that they know. Now, I did see a scary stat about news that Facebook is the third biggest news organization in the UK, news source in the UK, which is equal parts really interesting and equal parts petrifying, given some of the utter garbage that manages to unmoderated find its way on there. But there's a whole other podcast about what should Facebook be doing about that. So we'll maybe park that for later, or for a Christmas special or something. But look, so TBWA, do you communicate with, you look at how clients communicate with the public is maybe a simplistic way of boiling down what you do. And as we mentioned, as you didn't mention COVID, but I did, I want to put you on the spot a little bit with a slightly political question about the government's response to COVID. Not what did they do right and what did they do wrong, but there was a lot of discussion and debate about whether they communicated their message right. Now, in the early days, they seemed to jump through a couple of slogans and then stuck on, I think it was stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. It then spiraled into various other bits, stay alert, control the virus, save lives, other things. And then now with hands, face, space. Just as a professional in the industry, so I'm not after what do you think of the politicians' response, but what do you think of the communication of the message under the COVID?
I love that question, and I'm trying to think about the number of different slogans that the government went through in order to illustrate my answer. Many. I think you had stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. I shouldn't be laughing about this really. Stay alert, protect the NHS, save lives. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Because you can control the virus.
Yeah. Wash hands, cover face, make space. Eat out to help out, we can't forget. Yep. Rule of 6. Yep. Hands, face, space. Maybe there were some other ones, I don't know. So look, there are 6 or 7 individual calls to action, slogans, straplines, whatever you want to describe them as, over the course of less than 6 months. And in my opinion, the best pieces of communication are bullseye, single-minded, and very, very specific and simplistic in what they are setting out to describe or setting out to ask people to do. So in that respect, I think we can all agree, and I think there is some consensus around the lack of simplicity in what the government's communications have come out to do. That said, I think it's difficult to damn that completely, because the situation was, I will not use that U word, but the situation was really unlike any other situation that the government have faced before, and therefore there was a need to iterate a little bit. So I can understand why things happened in the way that they did, but from my perspective, to not have a singular rallying cry for the nation, to galvanize the nation and bring them all together around, is a real miss.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not just record. I'm not going to ask you how old you are, but people of a certain vintage, of which I am one, will remember government communication campaigns like "clunk click every trip." It is something I haven't heard on TV or on the radio probably since I was about 6 or 7. Yeah. But still now. No, every time I put my seatbelt on, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, go and ask your granddad, right? But it clunk click every trip, put your seatbelt on. And now that was a singular message for a singular target. And I do appreciate that, like COVID and the research and the science was a moving target for the government at all times. But that lack of simplicity, driven from policy sometimes as well, but it just seemed to undermine that message of, we just need to get this across. And they had a platform to millions of people every single day via the podium addresses from the Prime Minister or senior ministers, plus the millions they spent on advertising as well, yet seemed to just cock it up to an extent. I'm not putting words in your mouth. Would that be fair though? Do you think?
I love the technical term, cock it up. It's a great technical term. Yeah.
A Bradford term.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. I think it's so difficult because they had to move at such pace. I think what's fascinating is, the campaign you're describing around road safety and making sure that you're putting your seatbelt on follows along that rhythm of 3 very short punctuated phrases. And a lot of what the government needed to do with their campaign was instructional, and the messaging had to be quite rational, right? But again, I think there is a missed opportunity to consider one central platform off of which you can then deliver specific targeted messaging in a way that any good comms plan would work for any individual campaign. What is our lead message? And then how are we supporting the individual tactical and phase messages underneath that? And that, I think, is where they failed, because they just kept replacing the overarching takeout and the overarching message.
I have a little bit of hope that hands, face, space will stick. I personally think it could work really, really well. And if you look at the way they've executed that in some of their TV ads and digital ads, I wash my hands to protect my nan. And yeah, you might say some of it's a bit cheesy, but if you look at how the initial messaging changed and evolved, they were trying to move the target a little bit, but hands, face, space feels like whether the virus is getting better or worse, whether the R numbers are going up or down, is something that could become a central plank. Maybe it's by accident. I don't know, but they do have some tremendous comms people working for the government who must be going bald in anger at, it must be a thankless task. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that it's interesting that you say that about hands, face, space, because it's probably one of the only slogans that I've seen be so heavily what's the right term for this, been so heavily copied and mocked, shall I say, certainly across social media. There's a whole load of memes that have been doing the rounds on that in various different ways. And actually, in my world, the more conversation there is about something, the better. So in some sense, I think that's kind of interesting that it started to penetrate culture in that way, that people are wanting to engage with it and make their own creations off the back of it. So you might be right.
It looks a bit like the Burger King model. Burger King aren't a client, are they? You're allowed to talk about Burger King.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
But it seems that their model of advertising at the minute is based around getting as much free eyeballs looking at their campaign as possible. Moldy Whoppers, go and buy a McDonald's, whatever it is. Yeah. It seems to be like the number one metric they're after. I have no inside knowledge of this. This is a complete guess. But it seems that they're, ad spend of minimal, reach of maximum. And it seems that's what they're aiming for. And if you're getting a slogan, hands, face, space, or whatever, mocked, and it's being taken on places and it has a simplicity to it, then maybe it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of inevitable. And I think more and more brands adopt that approach ever since the balance of power shifted away from brands to consumers. With the advent of so many different new channels, the proliferation of channels that consumers are showing up in, more of which are appearing day by day, week by week, especially actually during lockdown, which has accelerated it. It's inevitable that whatever activity a brand puts out into the world needs to be part of that conversation and drive conversation by the consumer rather than by the brand. So I think Burger King's a fantastic example. And I think the CMO there, Fernando Machado, has done an excellent job in shifting the focus and attention away from more traditional communication frameworks into something that goes, I want to create something that gets talked about. Moldy Whopper, favorite campaign of the last few years. It's I know it's very polarizing, but I think it's as a result set out what it needed to do.
Absolutely. Fernando, if you're listening, give us a call. You can be a guest on the strategy session soon. I really would like to interview him, actually, because the key thing I always think about that campaign is it may be moving all the metrics. I can't wait for the award submission at the end of the year or next year, wherever, where they talk about how many more burgers did it sell. That's the key thing I'm waiting to find out. Did it drive footfall? Well, not footfall because it's dodgy, but that's what I'm looking for. Is how does it all connect together? So Fernando, you can be up next, episode 14. Give us a shout. So let's stop talking about the government and start talking about some of the stuff you're involved in. And tell us about a campaign that you guys have done at TBWA, or that you've done, that's got your fingerprints all over it, that has worked really well, and kind of deconstruct it for us, because I want to know what makes a great campaign. That's what I really want to get to. So tell us that story through the eyes of something you've been involved in.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and something that we could now talk about forever, because this is why we do what we do, is for the work, really. I think we are lucky enough to have worked on a campaign that I think featured on the strategy sessions when Dan Rubel talked about it with the Hun work that we did for one of our clients, Hun Wines, which is a real young startup brand. Wine in a can, what's not to love, folks, what's not to love? And we delivered a campaign for them earlier this year in around May time. And it was an absolute delight for a whole host of reasons. And we've spoken at length about this on a number of other, with a number of other partners. But they came to us with very, very little budget. They're a startup, inevitably, with very, very little budget. And they said, somehow we need something that makes a splash. And they cited brands like Brewdog as a really good inspiration for them in just doing something a little bit more provocative, shall we say, to catch the attention of their target audience, which was much younger, 18 to 24. They wanted to, they had originally set out to speak to that audience through the summer of festivals that of course didn't happen. So they needed something to make a splash to make up for all of that stock that they were sitting on, that they'd had ready for launch. And we had several conversations with them, and, interesting fact here, we actually only ever met them in person once before we then constructed the whole rest of the campaign and the thinking and the selling and the production and the delivery, all virtually. So true testament to our times.
That's a full 2020 vibe, isn't it?
Yeah, right. I know. But it's weird, right? Because you're getting these clients to take a punt on something when you've only ever been this far away from their face once. It's kind of strange. So we had a little mull about the right way to drive the kind of fame and PR that we wanted to. And we looked at the conventions. Let's go back to our methodology here. What are the conventions in the alcohol category? It's a heavily regulated category as it is. But what are the conventions, and how is a brand with this little budget going to be able to stand out? And the only way we felt we were going to be able to stand out was to show the brand up where you wouldn't expect it to be. Because that's really what it was doing from a product perspective, right? Wine shouldn't be in a can. That's kind of weird. That feels like a new proposition within the category. So we generated and delivered a campaign for them, which really poked fun at the use of out of home during a time when no one was out of their homes. And it sounds completely bonkers to ask someone to invest their money in something like that. But, the team came up with some brilliant copy lines, and we looked at a number of different ways into it, including, our advertising agency recommended that we advertise in digital out of home panels. Now they're no longer our advertising agency. That's a line that we generated, because why not? And it was really, really super successful. And I think within just a month of having launched that campaign, they saw over 1,000% increase in people visiting their website. They saw a huge bump in Instagram followers because we replicated a lot of that work on their Instagram channel. They saw a huge, I think something like sub 500% increase in sessions on their site, leading to conversion. So all in all, right through from PR buzz, editorial coverage, but down to where the money matters, which is pure hard ROI, that campaign really delivered. And I think it delivered for some really simple reasons. And the first is it was simple. It was very, very simplistic. We kept the messaging very singular and focused. And I use that word a lot. I've probably used it 5 times already just in the course of this conversation. It's a very singular strategy. We show up where you wouldn't expect us to, surprise. And from that, you can iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate. And we are so pumped and pleased with the way that campaign turned out. Watch this space is all I'm going to say.
Okay. Well, in the show notes, there's a link to the Hun campaign, so you can have a look at what they've done. Some of the outdoor is truly amazing. And to go back to the digital marketers argument, you hear, I go to a lot of digital conferences and speak at various digital conferences, and the number of times I hear people standing on stage slagging out of home particularly. It's probably the one after printed press that gets the most abuse. It's just being utterly waste of money. Why would you do this? Blah, blah, blah. But the whole campaign was built around some great out of home placements. And And out of home, I'm guessing at the time, was peanuts, wasn't it? Because nobody wanted out of home. So you must have got huge reach for a fraction of the budget you expected.
Yeah, we did. We really did. But also, I think what people are perhaps a little short-sighted about when describing out of home as being a forgotten channel from a media perspective is out of home now doubles as a social channel, because if you put out of home messaging in those sites that is compelling enough to create a conversation for people to go up and take a snap of it on their phone and post it to their Instagram, you double, you triple, you quadruple your reach anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's not limited to out of home. It's not limited to the 100,000 footfall that you're going to see walking past the site. And I think people forget that sometimes. So I think that was a really good example of something simple and effective that we shouldn't be shying away from recommending to our clients anymore. I think also in my world, in communications, creative industry world, there is an old adage and an old hangover from the good old 50s and 60s Mad Men days, which is if you can't, yeah, nice poster on the back of your wall there. If you can't land an idea in a poster headline, it's not clear enough. It's not simple enough. Mm-hmm. And loads and loads and loads of people forget about that now. If you can't articulate an idea in 40 characters or a single headline on a 48-sheet poster, then I don't understand what that idea is and how that's going to land, because you shouldn't have to take longer than that to explain it to me. Because we all know now we have a smaller attention span than a goldfish, was it? So you're expecting a lot of customers if they need to spend longer than that trying to understand what you're saying.
Now, well, the goldfish thing is a particular irritation. I've got a presentation all about that and the research behind it, which turned out to be utter shit.
Well.
But I take the point is still the same. Whether you're driving past a poster site, you're not. People who do creative and own brands think everybody cares about products you're advertising as much as you do. And it's great that we all in the industry love what we do and love and care about what we do. But the customers don't give a shit. They just want something that will do the thing they need it to do. So just can you communicate that really quickly? So, I love the approach. Keep it simple. If you can't get it in a headline, don't worry about it. And what's the sort of relationship between placement and creative? So in some places and some people will tell you, just get the placement right and everything's fine. Others will tell you the creative's got to be right. Obviously the answer's probably it's a bit of both, but how do you work that tension? And, do you design for certain media first, or do you come up with the idea and then spread it around?
Media and message are inextricably linked, and there are lots of brilliant examples of where that has worked really, really well. Again, back to good old days of just consecutive media buys, where you might have 2 quarter pages facing each other. Now I am showing my age. You might have 2 quarter pages facing each other in the same way that you have proximity 6 sheets outside big retailers now, and you can run specific messages. I think the best kind of idea and the best kind of executions always blend media and message expertly. And I think also it's important to talk about, I'm on the agency side here, but that's what clients need more of. And creative agencies working hand in hand, hand in glove, all of the above, with media partners, with publishing platforms, with as many different partners as the client can afford, frankly, in one room with a joint response against any brief is the only way forward. And sadly, I think that sometimes it's a struggle for that to happen for a lot of agencies, simply because our world is becoming harder and harder, right? There's a lot of land grabbing that's going on. There's a challenge always around keeping that new business coming through your door. But my philosophy is always, keep everyone in this together, because it's the only way ultimately we can get to the best work. And that is what is at stake here for us as agency partners, but most importantly, our clients. They just want to get to the best work, the most effective work.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes when you work in multi-agency approaches, or the different teams from different places, even sometimes when I've worked on projects where bigger agencies have been involved and they maybe have quite a siloed approach, watching the internal fighting, sometimes you're like, you all work for the same place, just get on the same page. So frustrating when the client just wants the work to be great.
Yeah.
So you must have some great creatives at your place. I'm trying to find a way of using the line. I'm just going to use it anyway. One of my favorite quotes is the David Abbott line about how important creative is, even in a digital world, which is shit that arrives at the speed of light is still shit. Which I love, which is some sort of segue and jump off into let's talk about creatives. What do you, when you're recruiting creatives, what do you look for other than smart boots, turn up jeans, and one of those little sort of fisherman hats, because that's what all creatives wear, isn't it? And shackets. But what do you look for in creatives other than the right uniform? You're laughing because you've got at least half a dozen of those working at your place, haven't you?
It's a stereotype. If ever I heard one, Andy,
it is, but there's a reason why that stereotype is there.
I don't know what you mean. Look, I think it's really just about ingenuity and coming at things in a really fresh and different way. And I don't know whether you've seen this, but just in the last few days, there's been a team who they've been featured now in Little Black Book and in Adweek and in Ad Age, etc. They tweeted a lot of the big agencies in London. So they tweeted us, they tweeted TBWA, they tweeted a whole raft of other agencies saying, we've held your TikTok accounts hostage and we'll only let them go if you give us a placement. And the industry is ablaze with absolute delight at this innovative and fresh approach from, I don't even know what their names are, from this very, very young creative team looking to make their mark in the industry. Mm-hmm. That is how you get hired. Yeah. That is a phenomenal and very different and, may I say, very disruptive approach to showing off how creative you can be in a modern, progressive, relevant for now way. Those guys, I guarantee you, will now work for the rest of their lives as a result of having done that. I can see already just across Twitter that they've had multiple job offers in the last 24 hours. So, speaks for itself.
Great. And what does that make you, with that sort of innovative approach, how do you view formal, traditional education? And as I say in most episodes, there's a lot of younger marketers listen to this, some sort of graduates and things like that. What's your view then on that traditional approach to education? Is it still worth having? Or is it just about being smart and funny and hijacking TikTok accounts?
I think there's always merit in the same way that we say you need to understand the codes and the patterns of something before you can break them, right? There's always merit in learning and understanding the foundations to getting to a great creative idea. And there are, I really don't want to be misinterpreted here in saying that that's not necessary, because there are some brilliant creative schools, SCA, Brixton Finishing School, Watford. There's so many wonderful creative courses that are absolutely exceptional at instilling a real sense of how do you break down the brief? How do you then define what the idea is in response to that brief? How do you stretch and pull that idea in multiple different ways? And can you, at the end of the day, distinguish from execution and idea? Because sometimes if you don't go through that process, there may be some gold that comes out in your responses, and you may have a fantastically entrepreneurial way of thinking about things. But again, the clients pay their agencies to solve their briefs, to solve for their business problems. This isn't just about doing fun, wacky stuff for the sake of it. And there is merit in understanding the process that you need to go through in order to do that.
Brilliant. No, I love that. And I talk to people sometimes like, what sort of marketing do you do? I was like, boring marketing. What do you mean by that? I was like, process, structure, strategy. Like, but I thought you do strategy, isn't that cool? I was like, mainly just boring stuff and asking a lot of questions most of the time. But understanding those elements, you've got to understand that first before you can jump off and start doing daft stuff. So I'm glad it's not just me saying that.
No, and I think one of the things I love about TBWA London is we talk about ourselves a lot as being pirates. So one of TBWA's old founding clients is Apple, and there's a very famous quote that people can't decide whether or not they should attribute to Steve Jobs or Lee Clow, which is why be in the Navy if you can be a pirate. And that really sums up and represents that pirate spirit, that disruptiveness that we like to bring to specific challenges. But a lot of the time, as we've discussed, that can be hard and inappropriate in some instances, depending on what the nature of a client brief is. at TBWA London, we have something that we call pilot projects, which are pro bono, proactive, creative projects that we as an agency really believe in, and they aren't attached to paying clients. And I think that's really compelling for creative teams, especially that work with us and for us, because it allows them the opportunity to really, really play around and learn and develop in ways that sometimes are more difficult and challenging on client briefs. And a great example of that is a really wonderful idea that a team came to our chief creative officer and I and a number of other people with, around the fact that, you know, over the last 12 months or 9 months, a lot of us have been using video calls a lot more, and that's been incredibly exhausting and difficult and energy sapping for people. So they developed this platform called Sound the Excuse, which is designed to, it's a series of mini sounds where if you just can't bear to be on a call any longer, you know, we pre-recorded lots of little funny sounds like your flatmate being stuck in the loo, or like your cat being sick, or in a car door delivery. It's genius. You've got to check it out. And we made it, and we invested in it ourselves as an agency, and we launched it in time for World Mental Health Day last month. And I love that we've done that, because it gives us still the opportunity to flex our creative chops and muscle on things that we love and things that we're really, really passionate about, as well as, of course, do brilliant work for our clients.
Brilliant. There'll be a link to that in the show notes again, so please do check this out and use it whenever you need to get an excuse to get off Zoom calls. But people could be forgiven listening to us chatting today to think that in agency land, the sun always shines, it's rosy in the garden all the time.
It's Mary Poppins. I told you, it's Mary
Poppins here, and everything goes really, really well. There's no problems ever, and it's wonderful. Clients pay you obscene amounts of money, and then we all drink Pims or whatever it is at the end of the day. It's something like that, right? It's not quite the case. Talk to us about when stuff goes wrong, because you learn a lot of lessons when stuff goes wrong. So have you been involved in any, I won't say disasters, but any mistakes, any funny stories about when stuff's gone wrong?
I wish that clients paid us loads of money and we all drank Pims. That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
I don't even like Pims, but if somebody's paying for it, I'd be like, yeah, hell, get it. I'm from Bradford originally. Nice. You can't drink Pims if you're from Bradford. It's on your birth certificate. Absolute truth.
When have things gone wrong? I mean, I made a really catastrophic mistake. I was wondering whether or not to share this, but I will, because...
Yes, share it. Nobody's listening, it's fine.
Nobody's listening. Okay. So, and it was in, I've worked in a few agencies in my time, and it was in an agency that shall remain unknown, and a big retail client running a promotion for a certain percentage off knickers and socks or something, I don't know, one of those weekend deals. And it was a 2-week-long promotion. So week 1 was going to be 25% off. And then that was going to move up week 2 to 40% off. And old Muggins here supplied them the wrong way round. So we had, it was print ads again back in the day. So we were in, getting all of the proofs through to supply to all of the papers. And we just supplied the wrong one. And I remember the client going rightly, absolutely ballistic, because of course, if you've advertised that you're running a 40% off promotion, then you have to honor it if someone takes that in store. So that was a real disaster. And I think I cried for a couple of days thinking, I'm probably never going to work again. This is going to follow me around. My reputation is total and utter dust. I better go and move to somewhere very remote so no one can find me. So that was pretty rubbish. But again, we're all human. We all make mistakes. And my boss at the time said to me, Katie, you just need to learn the power of oops. I said, sorry. She went, you just have to learn the power of oops, because you're not a robot. We're all fallible. We all make mistakes. And yes, there will be a little bit of a fallout on this, but the power of oops is something that no matter what you do, who you are, as evidenced by the political situation in the US over the last 4 years, sometimes oops really just gets you over the line on things. So there you go.
Brilliant stuff. Now tell me as well, because obviously everybody wants to be a copywriter at some point in their life. Was the headline on these 40% off ads, knickers are down? Or was that?
No, but here's something for free. One of our creatives, I remember, and we didn't run with this line. In fact, I don't think we presented it to the client, came up with the line, knicker drop of glory.
Yes, you heard it here first.
Very
You've got
good.
to understand your client before you pitch that, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. Not one to take forward, but thank you very much.
Brilliant. We're running out of time because you have important things to do in your role as managing director of a big agency. But before we go, I've got a few questions I need to ask you, and I also need to sing for you as well. So I'm going to ask you in a minute for a top tip, which we can share with anyone. You just sort of tell us who it's for and what it is. But before we do that, what about books? Tell us about books that you read, or where do you go to keep abreast of what's happening in the industry?
I love this question, and I'm actually a big fiction reader rather than a non-fiction reader. But there are a couple of things that I think are worth calling out. The first one is "Why Did the Policeman Cross the Road?" by Stephen Colgan, which you may or may not know. Stephen's a guy who worked for the Met actually for 30 years or something, but he worked in their problem-solving unit. And when you read this book, it will blow your mind in terms of the creative solutions that problem-solving unit came up with to address certain issues that were going on in the community or whatever it was. For instance, I think there was, some of the captions read, "Can lollipops reduce antisocial behaviour?" Yes, they can. Can defate bus stops protect pensioners? Yes, they do. And there's all these wonderful examples of where there are certain problems in a community that are taken to the Met Police to solve, and the problem solving unit would go, there's a totally different way of diagnosing this problem and coming at it. And I love that. So that's a really, really a good one to read. The second one, because it's super topical and because obviously we share the same name, is 11 Rings by Phil Jackson. I mean, who hasn't watched The Last Dance on Netflix about Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls? Phil Jackson, coach of the Chicago Bulls. It's an amazing leadership book, and I don't think it's marketing specific necessarily, but it's just a really good leadership book. And then one final thing, which isn't a book, but is a newsletter that I really recommend any strategist and anyone trying to learn more about the tech landscape and various different things sign up to, which is the Benedict Evans newsletter. So Benedict Evans used to work for a VC firm called Anderson Horowitz, also known as A16Z, and his newsletter is exceptional. So sign yourselves up to that.
Brilliant stuff. Last Dance, absolutely loved it. And for it, I didn't warm to Michael Jordan watching it. He came across like a bit of a prick. But
ego, hey?
I mean, my first proper marketing job was working in professional sport at Durham County Cricket Club, and it is a common trait in top level, the very best sports, because they're so driven. And they have to be to get to the level that they're at. They just have this blinkered mentality, but it does make them hard to be around sometimes, and just real assholes a lot of the time. But that's why they're so driven and so good. But brilliant. Anyway, it's time for a song. Are you ready? Are you ready for what comes after this?
Yes,
so it's the part of the show you've all been waiting for. It's time for a T.O.P.T.I.P.
Yay! It's so nice to hear that live. I sort of want to sing it back to you now, but I'm not going to.
You're allowed if you want. You can if you
no,
like.
I can't.
Remember the click.
Okay, T.O.P.T.I.P. Hey! Oh God. So I think my top tip is, and it sounds a little bit throwaway really, is please remember to be yourself. There's so much rhetoric and so much conversation and chat about what great marketeers, what great leaders, what great strategists should look like and should be. And I think I probably paid too much attention to that when I was younger. And I think that's really stressful, and there's too much anxiety that comes down on you. So it's a more general sense of just be yourself. And if you like to sing to make your point, if you like to wear whatever you want to wear, if you like to work on your own, whatever it is, that's you. Bring yourself to work and you'll fly.
Brilliant. Absolutely love that. What was it? Oscar Wilde, be yourself, everyone else is taken. Is that
exactly
Oscar
that?
Wilde? Yeah, brilliant.
Exactly
absolutely love that. Absolutely love it. Right. We always finish the show with the same question. So this is a flag that it's finishing and we can let you go. What one question did you expect me to ask that I haven't?
I think I was expecting you to ask, what would I be doing if I wasn't doing this?
Oh, and what's the answer? What would you be doing if you weren't running TBWA?
And what would I be doing if I wasn't running TBWA? I think this year actually has really opened my eyes to the need for much greater sense of social change. So, I think probably something in the charity sector or CSR sector to really start to drive grassroots social change, because no one's doing it well enough at the moment. And I think there's a big opportunity to make some changes.
Brilliant. And on that note, we shall leave it. Katie Jackson, Managing Director of TBWA, thank you for your time. It's been eye-opening, it's been enjoyable, it's been fun. If you're a young marketer, there's been loads in this for you. If you're an established marketer, there's loads there as well. Please do let us know what you think. Get in touch on Twitter, where Katie is...
K_Jackson_01.
There you go. And I'm at Andy Jarvis, Andy with an I. Both of those, by the way, are in the show notes on whatever app you're watching, listening to this on. So do get in touch. Let us know what you think. Thank you very much. And come back in 2 weeks for the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Andy. Thank you.
Bye.